Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 8th of June. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. The diplomatic flurry of activity aimed at reviving the peace process between Israel and the Palestinians continued today with the arrival of Czech Foreign Minister Lubomir Zaorla. The Czech diplomat pushed for a two-state solution and added his voice to the international chorus, urging Israel to acquiesce to the demands of the Palestinian Authority. Even though his nation considers Israel to be a close friend, Zaorla warned that if the situation doesn't change, it will be hard for the Czech Republic to maintain its position. In his remarks, Netanyahu accused the Palestinians of repeatedly pushing away from negotiations and instead seeking to isolate Israel.
The Palestinians don't negotiate. They ran away from negotiations. They ran away from Barak. They ran away from Sharon. They ran away from Omer. They ran away from me. It's a perfect trap in a foreign ministry. What they do is they refuse to negotiate, refuse to deal with the framework of John Kerry in the White House, run to Hamas, which calls for our destruction, go to the UN and try to get sanctions on Israel. They refuse to negotiate and then try to get boycotts on Israel for there not being negotiations, which they refuse to enter.
U.S. Secretary of the Treasury Jack Lew faced a jeering crowd at the annual Jerusalem Post conference in New York, and yet another sign of the strain in the relationship between the United States and Israel. IBA's Ellie Wogelenter has this report.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Jack Lew was booed loudly at the Jerusalem Post conference yesterday when the audience interrupted his speech as he tried to defend the Obama administration's commitment to Israeli security and his pledge to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon.
I recognize that we may not agree on everything, but there is no question that there is no questioning the commitment of this president to the state of Israel. Iran's nuclear program. This is a concern our administration deeply shares, and it is a concern that I personally deeply share. The president is committed to taking on terrorist groups like Hezbollah and Hamas, and that means standing up to those who undermine the state of Israel's basic legitimacy.
Following Lew's address, Infrastructure, Energy and Water Minister Yuval Steinitz attempted to calm tensions by thanking Lew for his efforts to secure a spot for Israel in the OECD when he was Deputy Secretary of State.
Jacob Lew is a real friend of the state of Israel. We use the opportunity to thank Jacob Lew for his commitment and dedication.
And as if to bolster its bona fides as a friend of Israel, the White House reaffirmed Washington's support for Israel's right to defend itself hours after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu complained about the world's silence over the latest rocket fire from Gaza.
Nedra, this is not the first time that I'd stand at a podium like this and strongly condemn rocket attacks by extremists in Gaza against innocent Israeli citizens. Clearly, the United States stands with the nation of Israel as they defend their nation and their people from these attacks.
Back to New York, where a main topic at the J-Post conference was the BDS movement, Netanyahu delivered a tape message for the conference about the issue.
Delegitimization must be fought. It's not about this or that Israeli policy. It's about our right to exist here as a free people, our right to defend ourselves, our right to determine our own future. In the battle against delegitimization, our most potent weapon is the truth. We must speak the truth, loudly, clearly, proudly.
Others spoke out as well, including Minister Steinitz, who slammed the boycott movement as racist and anti-Semitic.
We have to fight it, Israelis and Jews together, and any decent person, with the help of the American administration, with the help of Canada, with the help of Britain, with the help of our friends of Australia. We have to stand up and to put a racist bench or tag to those racist and anti-Israelis before they are putting a yellow tag on us. And we can do it together. Israelis, American, Jews, non-Jews, any decent person.
In the latest development in the scandal over Orange, the CEO of the French telecom operator has accepted an invitation from the government to come to Israel in the near future. Stéphane Richard says that the trip will offer him the opportunity to, in his words, clarify the misunderstanding, put an end to the controversy, and reaffirm his group's commitment to the Jewish state. Richard ignited furious reaction this past week when he announced Orange would sever ties with its Israeli franchise holder, Partner Communications, after widespread accusations that the partially French government-owned company capitulated to the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement against Israel. Richard tried to retract the statements while insisting that there was no political motivation for the decision. Partner and others have rejected his apology as a smokescreen. If you boycott us, we will boycott you. That was the message from Education Minister Naftali Bennett at the annual IDC conference in Herzliya, where he warned that the BDS campaign can be a double-edged sword.
Let it be clear to any company or organization that's considering boycotting us, we will hit back. We will attack our attackers. We will boycott our boycotters. The boycott weapon is a double-edged sword. If you're thinking of boycotting Israel, keep in mind that there's tens of millions of Israel supporters around the world, Jews and non-Jews, with considerable buying power and boycott power. Whoever boycotts Israel will be boycotted. Whoever hits Israel will be hit back. We will no longer remain silent.
Former Mossad Chief Meir Dagan and former IDF Chief of Staff Gabi Ashkenazi have been accused of refusing orders from Prime Minister Netanyahu to strike Iranian nuclear facilities in 2010. Dagan called the order illegal while responding to the accusation made by columnist Carolyn Glick during a heated debate at the Jerusalem Post conference.
In 2010, according to a report that came out on the eve of America's presidential elections in 2012 in Uvda, the Israeli investigative report, we learned that two of the gentlemen on this panel with us, were given an order to prepare the military for an imminent strike against Iran's nuclear installations. And they refused. And
because it was an illegal order.
What?
It was an illegal order.
You were the director of Mossad. You were ordered by the security cabinet to prepare.
You don't know what happened there?
This is certainly a matter of interpretation.
The Prime Minister, without the authority of the government.
Had you not brought in your expert legal opinion to determine whether or not the Prime Minister of Israel and the Defense Minister of Israel have a right to order Israel to take action in its national defense, then we would not be where we are today. We would not be in a position where we are now faced with a situation where no international coalition will be built, where now we are seeing the United States moving forward towards the end of the month to conclude a nuclear agreement with Tehran that will enable them to acquire the bomb. We would be in a different position. They changed their mind about enriched uranium 2 years ago, not 5 years ago. We would be in a different position, and I think it is important to understand what we're dealing with here. Thank you.
Thank you. We don't have very much time in this panel. Thank you for your support. Mayor Dagan.
I was not afraid not from the Iranian, not from the Palestinians, not from the Egyptian, and not from the Syrian. Do you think that I would be afraid of somebody who's saying something in this audience? Now to the facts. Khamenei was smart enough to allow Rouhani to be elected as president. And as such, he adopted at least an appearance of a much moderated state. And there are much more radical elements in Iran, much far from Mr. Khamenei. They are holding positions that could not be accepted by the State of Israel.
Returning now to the Herzliya conference, where Attorney General Yehuda Weinstein directed several harsh words at new Minister of Justice Ayelet Shaked. He slammed several of the ideas that she's been promoting since taking office. The Attorney General said reflect a simplistic and baseless understanding of governance. Although he didn't explicitly mention her by name, the remarks were clearly directed at Shaked, who recently announced her intention to change the judicial system that she says currently calls the shots rather than publicly elected officials. Finance Minister Moshe Kahlon presented his wide-ranging plan to bring down the soaring real estate prices to the Housing Cabinet, which today convened for its first session. Kahlon is seeking to transfer almost all of the authorities related to the housing to the Treasury, which would grant his office unprecedented power over the property sector. The idea has stirred up a great deal of opposition, most notably from Minister of the Interior Silvan Shalom, who is accusing Kahlon of stripping many of his own responsibilities by restructuring the Israel Lands Authority, which manages tenders for state-owned property. Among the key elements of Kahlon's program are the streamlining of construction permits and the raising of taxes for those who purchase homes for investment purposes rather than their personal residences. Good news for parents. Following a lengthy series of demonstrations, demands, and promises, Education Minister Naftali Bennett and Finance Minister Moshe Kahlon today approved the assignment of an extra child care assistant to all public kindergartens for 3 to 4-year-olds. The new addition of manpower will already go into effect at the start of the next school year in September. There's been a major upset in Turkey where voters dealt a blow to President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his ruling Justice and Development Party. The loss of the parliamentary majority by the AKP has now dashed Erdogan's hopes of extending the powers of his presidency. We get more in this report from IBA's Aryeh O'Sullivan.
President Erdogan dreamt of more power. He ambitiously sought to change the constitution to create a more U.S.-style presidency, with him in charge. The return of a sultan as in the days of the Ottoman Empire. Instead, his party has lost its majority for the first time, and his dream lay in tatters, as Erdogan's party can only hang on to remain in power by forming a coalition with other parties. Although the ruling AKP Justice and Development Party remains the largest party in Turkey's National Assembly, it was handed its worst result in a decade, with only about 40% of the seats. This could mean that AKP's domination of the Turkish political scene for the past 13 years is no longer guaranteed. And the streets were filled instead with jubilant Kurds celebrating the first time the pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party passed the threshold, winning nearly 13% of the vote. The party, which also drew leftists and secularists, and whose deputy leader is a woman, have now placed themselves firmly into Turkish political consciousness, much to the fear of not only the AKP party, but the far-right National Movement Party, the MHP, which won 17% of the vote on an anti-Kurdish platform. It was also a personal victory for the party's charismatic leader, Selahattin Demirtas. The main opposition Republican People's Party, CHP, received 25% of the vote. The first impact of the end of Turkey's single-party stable rule was economic, as the Turkish stock market plunged and the lira fell to record lows against the dollar, losing over 5% since yesterday. Turkey has become a political pressure cooker, and the likelihood of new elections in the coming months is very high. Political analysts say it's an end of an era.
I think it's an end of a period. It's a long period that the AKP had enjoyed ruling the country on its own, the way it liked, because it had always a good parliamentary majority so that it could legislate everything. So it seemed that this is an end of an era.
There have already been calls for Erdogan to resign, but the AKP is attempting to put on an air of victory, with the Prime Minister saying they were Turkey's backbone. For the moment, Turkey is looking at 3 options: a coalition government, a minority AKP government, or early elections. What's unlikely is a coalition cobbled together by the opposition and the Kurdish party, which means that no matter what happens, Erdogan's AKP party will certainly not be leaving the stage. Aryeh O'Sullivan for IBA News.
In other regional news, Sunni Islamist Nusra Front rebels in Syria have posted video purporting to show their conquest of military outposts in the western town of Muhambil in the Idlib province, while boasting that they are closing in on coastal strongholds of the besieged government of Bashar al-Assad. Long lines of soldiers were filmed leaving the town, which lies close to a highway running between Aleppo in the north and the port city of Latakia, as the insurgents shot off machine guns and flaunted tanks and armored trucks they claim to have seized from the army. Syrian state television is claiming that loyalist forces killed tens of the terrorists and destroyed large convoys of Nusra Front fighters in Basan Kul, and that the loyalist forces are now regrouping for a counteroffensive. There has also been heavy fighting around the Abu al-Dahur military airport, which is the largest field in the north of the country and the last section in the eastern part of Idlib still controlled by the regime. Al-Nusra is linked to al-Qaeda and part of the Islamist alliance calling itself the Army of Fatah, in reference to the 7th century campaign that spread Islam across the Middle East. U.S. President Barack Obama and British Prime Minister David Cameron met on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Germany for a bilateral discussion on a host of issues, with Islamist terror topping the list.
We'll have an opportunity to discuss the effort against ISIS and the situation in Iraq and Syria, and assess what's working, what's not, and how we can continue to make progress there in dismantling the infrastructure that ISIL has built, and in promoting the kinds of political inclusion in Iraq and ultimately in Syria that are going to be necessary for a long-term solution. We'll also have a chance to talk about hotspots like Libya and Nigeria, where obviously terrorism has gotten a foothold.
As you said, Barack, there are so many issues to discuss at this meeting and bilaterally. With our very close partnership and the partnership between Britain and the United States, that special relationship. But they all really come down to two words, prosperity and security. What we want for our people back at home, which is the chance of job, and also the chance of greater security. Whether we're discussing the situation in the Ukraine, the need to fight Islamist extremist terrorism, particularly in Iraq and Syria, but elsewhere around the world.
Nearly 5,900 migrants have been picked up by an international fleet since Saturday amid their risky attempts to reach Europe from North Africa aboard unseaworthy boats. The Italian Coast Guard has coordinated the mission of vessels from the UK, Sweden, Spain, and its own Navy to help stem the tide of migrants risking perilous journeys across the Mediterranean. The United Nations Refugee Agency estimates that more than 1,800 asylum seekers have drowned so far this year. The European Union is bolstering its naval presence while still debating how to cope with the crisis. EU interior ministers will be meeting on June 16th to further discuss strategies of how to deal with the 46,400 others who have already succeeded in local finance. The shekel today put in a mixed performance in foreign currency trading, and share prices on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange were up across the board. Here's a look at the afternoon numbers. The IBA weather team says that we can expect unseasonably warm conditions later tonight that will carry over until tomorrow morning, although cooler and moister air will move into our region toward noon, when temperatures will drop and humidity will rise and the winds will pick up, creating haze, mainly in the south. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. We hope you'll join us again tomorrow, same time, same channel, when Laura Cornfield will be here with the latest breaking news from Israel. I'm Erin Viner, wishing you a great evening and shalom from Jerusalem.